What's up, everyone? We're back. I'm Dr. Shah.
I'm Dr. Maxfield.
And welcome to Dr. Lee Unhinged. We have one of our favorite people with us today, James Welsh, joining us from the UK. I presume that you're in the UK right now.
I am. Yeah.
Amazing. So one of my favorite people since I started creating content on social media, just one of the most authentic voices when it comes to reviewing beauty products, talking about the beauty industry, and just sharing his own personal preferences. So we absolutely love your content and are super appreciative for just your support of our channel over the past few years.
Oh, cool.
So for those of our audience who don't know you, just to kind of introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, hi. I'm James Welsh. I'm mainly a skincare influencer. I started off filming just skincare reviews. I used to love the way, like the original beauty gurus would review makeup. And I used to be like, no one's reviewing skincare like this. And I used to love skincare. So I was like, I'm going to do it kind of like Michelle Phan, Desi Perkins. I'm going to review it in that kind of way. And kind of went from there. Now my style's kind of changed more into like a bit more commentary because there's a lot of skincare reviewers nowadays. And I feel like a lot of people have learned what they need to know about skincare. So now I kind of do a bit more commentary on like the whole business side of it and brands, like brand history, controversies, that kind of style kind of stuff. But yeah, all skincare focused.
Yeah, I love the deep dives that you do on like different brands and their history and even the history of skincare. I love those videos because, as Dr. Maxfield knows, I'm like a huge history buff in the history of things. So I love when you go into those details, and your voice is super relaxing. So like a lot of times it will be pretty much the only beauty content I can watch anymore, because you know how like when you just consume this content all the time, like we'll just put the videos on and like just like have it running in the background sometimes, just because it's sometimes like a good way to unwind. So, but yeah.
I get told that about my voice. And then whenever I don't edit my own videos anymore, we were saying, but when I used to be like, why do I sound like that? Like, why do I sound so whiny and nasally? But like, I've come to like it because everybody says like it's nice and relaxing. They'll watch it when they do their skincare routine or even going to bed, and not in an insulting way, but I can send people to sleep. So I quite enjoy that. I think it's quite nice.
You do have a nice cadence of speech, and I actually find it soothing too. Now that we're airing this all out, it's very soothing. So interesting thing you already said too with your transition in how you've talked about skincare, because I've noticed that shift in how you're presenting and what you're presenting, and I have also kind of followed suit. Like, it's very rare for me to do a product review or even like a simple routine. I still do those, but I know they're not going to perform well. And also sometimes I'm like, I feel like I'm not providing any value anymore because the skincare space, it's just so highly educated. The things that would have been valuable to people 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago even, I mean, now it's common knowledge. So it's like, it's this continual evolution of like, what do we talk about? How do we evolve and still bring something meaningful to people in this?
No, that's exactly why I changed, because I found myself repeating myself over and over and over, and nothing's truly been that original in the skincare space for like 2 to 3 years now, even more so. I mean, K-Beauty's kind of come back in and introduce some interesting things to talk about again, but I just found myself being like, I've talked about this, everyone knows this, like everyone in the comments is answering questions for me, the usual questions I'd usually answer. So I was like, what else can I do that keeps people interested, and we can still talk about skincare, but then just kind of something a bit more interesting. I will still do skincare reviews, but like you said, it's more evergreen content that I know isn't going to get those views, but still keeps the core audience happy kind of thing. But I think that goes with my viewing habits as well, as I don't really watch skincare anymore. I watch like storytelling. So I thought, how do I merge the two together? So that's kind of where I am at the moment.
Yeah, I think as a content creator, like you have to be interested in your own content in a way. Yeah. So I started feeling like that as well, where like I felt like I was truly repeating myself over and over again, and I was bored of my own content. And even though there's like a new audience that's always going to come in and be fresh eyes on it, and it's going to be new information to them, so you still are doing a service, I did feel like I just didn't have that like passion for creating that type of content anymore, and so pivoted quite a bit in the style that I make content, and even what we do on YouTube has changed quite a bit. So it's evolving, and like I feel like you evolve with your audience, and especially if like your audience came in and like they didn't even know how to use a cleanser and how to use a moisturizer and like what is retinol, and then now they have this base knowledge, you can build upon that. So you can go deeper. You can talk about like really nuanced differences between ingredients, and they'll absorb it and be able to move on to the next stage with you. So that's been kind of fun. Like we've been going a lot deeper, and I think that people appreciate that a lot more than they would maybe 4 or 5 years ago when people were first introduced to skincare.
That's what TikTok has been good for me at the moment, is that I kind of like feel needed a bit more over there at the moment, because I talk strictly about, well, used to strictly talk about skincare on there. And to this day, I still get comments like, oh, what is a toner? I'm like, oh my God. I get excited because I'm like, this person doesn't know the skincare world yet. And I think that's good with TikTok, is you aren't just following, you mainly don't consume who you just follow. It's like new people all the time, being constantly reintroduced or introduced, to new things. So I still feel like I'm finding a new audience over there, which has been really interesting. I've literally just been able to go through my back catalog of content, kind of repurpose it and rescript it and kind of like update it and post it as new content. But yeah, it's interesting. On YouTube, people like over it. They're like, they don't care. I think unless it's from a true expert now, they're kind of like not looking for that kind of like skincare influencer other than for product recommendations.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because, you know, this is meant to come later, but I maybe we talk about it now. So like, what is an expert, right? Like, this is something I, you know, kind of struggle with a bit, because, you know, there is now like varying degrees of like expertise, and, you know, you have the cosmetic chemists, you have the product developers, you have the dermatologists, you have estheticians, you have nurses and physician assistants, and then you have skincare enthusiasts, people who just try tons of products, and through trying tons of products and interacting with their audience, they learn quite a bit. And then there are like sort of made up titles, like, you know, I'm a, you know, whatever, like an acne specialist, or, you know, these types of things that are not, they're not really like real things. So like, I guess in your experience, like, are you seeing, like, 'cause I remember when, you know, Hiram, you know, was exploding on social media, oftentimes you would have people criticizing him, saying like, hey, you're not a dermatologist. Did you get a lot of that as well? Or do you feel like because of the way that you make content and you never like say that you are a dermatologist, like people don't give you that type of heat?
No, I fully got it. When I first started YouTube, I think it was only me and Susan Yara at the time, really just concentrating on skincare. She kind of stopped talking about makeup so much from talking about skincare, and then Dr. Dre popped up. And that's when, like, not because of Dr. Dre, but I think at that time, more and more experts started coming online. So then people would be in my comments being like, why are you talking about skincare when you aren't a dermatologist? So then I would panic and I'd be like, oh, I better like do my research. And I'd be Googling like all this kind of stuff and trying to sound a bit more like an expert. And then I think then with the rise of like the dermatologists and then the real experts and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I can calm down now. Like I can just go back to reviewing basic skincare. But to this day, I do still get like, is he why is he talking about skincare? Is he a dermatologist? Blah, blah, blah. Which I find interesting, because a lot of derms, obviously not you two, everything I say does not include you two. There are derms online now who I look at, I'm like, we're talking about the same thing. Like, I'm a skinfluencer. Like, I'm probably the equivalent of like a beauty editor back in the day. And then I watch a dermatologist. I'm like, we're talking about the exact same thing. Like and especially when it comes to paid work as well, I'm like, we got the same brief. We're hitting the same points. So it's interesting how it's kind of come a bit more full circle. Like, the experts at the time were the people to listen to, because they really did bring something new to the table, and like a real, like, you know, it was amazing that we're getting all this free education from people who have spent years and years and years like studying this subject. And I feel like that's kind of depleted now, and like skincare experts now kind of meeting skinfluencers in the type of short form content that they're creating. So every so often I do still get, but you're not a dermatologist. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I know I'm not. I'm just reviewing skincare. So I do make it very clear that I'm an enthusiast. I have been called expert a few times by publications, which we've always pushed not to have that title put on me. But yeah, I still get it, but it doesn't bother me as much as it used to, because I'm like, well, go and watch the dermatologist say the same thing as me on another video.
or like a less accurate.
I was just going to say, so I feel a bit more equipped because of the knowledge that I've gained from other dermatologists. And do you know what I mean? So I'm able to say, well, actually I said that because so-and-so said it. So it's kind of like, it's all kind of like come together to make me feel a bit more confident about what I'm talking about.
So I really do feel like there is like a skincare community, and like everybody is valuable in that community. I've always felt like that since the very beginning, that the role that you play is super invaluable to the audience, because you try so many products. And like people don't realize this. There are and I know this now because I have my own brand, that like there are influencers who will like say anything about any product, like, and that's just the game. Like if you pay them or you gift them or they feel like they can sell product and make affiliate commission, they'll say anything. You're not one of those people. Like even when we sent you Remedy products, like your initial reviews were like, I'm trying this and I haven't had any issues with it yet. Like you were almost not even talking about like the benefits or like the results or anything, because you wanted to like truly try it. And so I think that the fact that you try things on yourself, the fact that you've tried so many different products, the fact that you're very honest and authentic, like there's value in that. But that wasn't built just off the first video anyone saw of you, right? Like I always say that trust comes from accuracy or authenticity or whatever you want to view it over time. Like people have tried your stuff, like the recommendations that you've made, they've liked them or agreed with your recommendations, and then they trust you more. And I think that a lot of people forget where the trust comes from. A lot of people think it's like the white coat or the credentials that give trust, and they give authority when someone first sees you. But I think if you're not being honest or you're not being accurate or recommending things that either don't work or like they're overhyped or overblown, then people will not trust you in the next recommendation. And then, yeah, like you got the one sale, but like you've lost that person's trust. I don't think that you do that. And I think that's why people continue to trust you over time. Did you make the conscious decision not to like frame yourself as an expert? Because I've seen a lot of other beauty creators do this thing where they're like, okay, well, if I need to be seen as an expert, maybe I take this course, like, or I try to get credentials in some way in order to be able to say like I am an expert. Or did you make that conscious decision not to do that and just be like, these are my recommendations and you can trust me or you can not trust me?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Like people have always been like, why don't you study to become an esthetician? I'm like, because I don't want to be. I don't feel the need to, because I know so many amazing estheticians I can send their direction, kind of thing. I think it's just because I'm a bit old school. I love the old YouTube, like what influencers were supposed to be in the very beginning, which is your friend who asks for recommendations, you trust their opinion, you trust their experience, and then people are supposed to kind of like use their own research to go and find the experts to kind of like, you know, get a bit more information. So it's been like, there's no point in me becoming an expert or trying to get any kind of like title or credential, because I just like being that kind of like friend who you ask their opinion of certain products for.
Well, and I think that speaks volumes to what you've been able to do with that, though, because even as you've kind of wrestled with that internally, like you've talked about, that trust is not only gained, it's obviously warranted and earned, and you're, I think, making a tremendous impact in this whole community because of that. But you brought up something that I think is very interesting, because you've talked a couple times about nuance and then having the YouTube channel. So the three of us have something very unique that other people do not have in social media, and that is a YouTube channel that does decently well. And so for me, I'll just tell you, I struggled tremendously initially with short form because we are used to, and I shared with you kind of before we started, like Dr. Sean and myself, we wrote a lot of papers before we switched over, like medical papers before we switched over to short form. And, you know, we're working with 3,000 word count limits, like formatting. And then all of a sudden, as a doctor, I'm like, oh, I have to condense this into a 15, 30-second video. How do I do that accurately? And so for me, a big blessing has been YouTube, because I felt like it gives each one of us an area to anchor the conversation. So I do want to ask, and like I'm kind of internalizing this as well. So just when you came out with that video, I'll tell you what I thought about. I'm like, okay, when James speaks, like I need to listen. And so I internalized that criticism, because I think actually it's a little bit of self-reflection I probably need to do. And I, support that for all of my colleagues. Like James Welsh is a very genuine individual and he comes from a good place. And so when you speak, I listen. And I think, doctor or not, we should all probably internalize some of this criticism, because I do think it's valid. But what do you think? What would your tips be, I guess, for doctors? What would you like to see them incorporate into their short form content to kind of offset, whether it's like the brand, because I'm with you. We all say the same thing when it comes to a brand script, because there's points, but like, how could we do better?
It's really tough to say, because as someone who isn't a doctor and who, doesn't know what I don't know, it's really hard to say what's missing. I think one thing I've always said about the two of you is you managed to kind of perfectly blend short form content with giving just enough information that it's not sensationalized or misleading or I don't know how to explain it, but your videos always have a more of like, if you need to know more, you can ask me in the comments, not I'm going to leave you hanging for a bit of a clickbait kind of thing. And I feel like a lot of doctors or whatever their titles may be, especially with short form, it's not so bad now TikTok allow longer form content. But in the beginning, when it was much shorter, it was seeing these real experts who you have a lot of respect for kind of fall into the influencer trap of clickbaiting, but then clickbaiting to not educate, if that makes sense, felt kind of weird. Like it's a lot of like pointing at things, and then you didn't really say anything. Not you, but the expert didn't say anything,
I've done it.
Or they were like, "Have you done?"
Yeah, I've done the pointing too.
It's like I think like everyone's done it, right? There's someone who I don't watch, I don't follow, who all they do is they have just screen footage of them pointing, and they just drop it into every single video. But I'm like, what are you bringing though? You are a true expert. Like I should be learning something with every single video, more so than just like how you feel about a product, if that makes sense. And I feel you two do that well in the sense where you recommend products, but then also speak to your expertise in a certain way. And I feel like that's what a lot of people miss. They concentrate so much into trying to fall into the algorithm and get that TikTok, trap them in within like 1 second. And then like, kind of like, they concentrate more on that engagement rather than doing what people want from an expert, which is a little bit of entertainment, but essentially just coming away learning something every single time. But like I said, I feel like that has become less and less. I think with a bit of call out culture from certain people, and with the longer form content being allowed on TikTok now. Did that make sense? I ramble on a bit.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I do struggle with this, right? Because I do think that when we first started creating content, we weren't the first. I started on TikTok relatively early, wasn't the first there. We weren't the first on YouTube. But I think our perspective has always been like, what value do people get out of this? Is it actionable? Is it accurate? Is there a nuance we're leaving out where without that nuance, like the recommendation becomes dangerous to some extent, right? Like you'll see short form videos where doctors will say, hey, like everyone needs to be taking this medication, right? But it's like not either, like it's like not everyone should be. There's a nuance there, right? That sure, like that's a great hook where, if somebody's scrolling their feed, they see that they're like, oh, this is something everyone needs to be taking. And then they don't ever put the nuance in there. Well, actually, this is only good under these circumstances, or only these people should be using it, or these people shouldn't be using it because it would be dangerous for those people. And they leave out like the nuance that's necessary to either like to be accurate and safe. And so I've seen certainly a rise of this because I do think the barrier to entry has decreased significantly. Like it used to be harder to make content in a way because there wasn't all these apps that made it so easy to edit. There wasn't all these like ring lights and, studio setups. There wasn't all these YouTube videos on how to create content. And, like it wasn't as accessible, right? So like there was a barrier to entry. And so the people who entered, I think did a lot more they tried hard to understand the skincare space. And even when I first started creating content, I was consuming a lot of content. Like I was watching like what influencers were saying, what was Dr. Dre saying, like, cause that was like sort of the anchor in a lot of ways when we first started creating content of like what the, I guess, gold standard from like an opinion standpoint was. And then I was, looking at my books and reading papers and then like coming back with like unique points of views on things and like really trying to add value. But now I feel like it's just like people repeating what other people are saying. And like, I even see Derms just like, they'll just repeat like what an influencer said, which they read from like a headline in like the Huffington Post or like the New York Post, where it's like benzene and benzoyl peroxide gives you cancer. And then they're just like, they see an influencer say it and then the doctor repeats the same thing. And like, no one in that cycle of content has actually done taking the time to actually look at what the data is saying. And then you have other experts that come in and they add a little bit more nuance, but now you have like created like a dangerous situation in some situations where we even saw a lot of doctors saying like that benzene was in sunscreen products and that like you should throw away your sunscreen products. And then now we see this whole epidemic of people saying sunscreen causes cancer. And it all started from like a headline that no one researched properly and then was amplified by quote unquote experts. And we're kind of in a tough situation because like these are our colleagues a lot of times. And then a lot of times they're not our colleagues. They're, either not really doctors or they're, something else. And it's hard to be to say, hey, like, you know, you don't want to, like, I'm not the type of person to publicly call somebody out. Like, I'll direct message somebody and say, like, hey, that's, you know, you should reconsider that. Like, this has been debunked many times on social media. Like, you know, you may want to reconsider the post, but it's tough to be like peers and be like a voice of reason there. So I appreciate that you call this stuff out. I appreciate that other people call this out. But it is a difficult situation to navigate because the barrier to entry is so low that anyone can just hold up their phone now and like post.
Yeah. I think the problem is if you call these people out, you'll still have people in the comments being like, well, why should I believe you over them? Even if, for example, a plastic surgeon was talking about why chemical sunscreens cause cancer and you shouldn't use them, as an example, and then you, a dermatologist, who actually knows about this stuff, said it wasn't, people still believe a surgeon because that's who they follow. They've liked his other videos. So you can call people out all you want, but there will still be people who are misguided in who should be talking about what, who will still believe the surgeon over you, for example. I don't mind doing it because I feel like I can like call out these people because I'm kind of like almost like separate from it, if that makes sense. Like you said, they are your colleagues, but I kind of come in as more of like an outsider and more of the sense like, I think that's wrong because this is what I've heard from this professional who is maybe a little bit more educated in that subject area, right? And then I think I've just gotten used to calling people out, which is, I think it's an okay thing. I try and do it nicely. unless they complete, like there was an example of a dermatologist who was getting so many things wrong and all they wanted was that catchy hook. Like, you know, you need these, whatever, or you should be doing this, or you're doing this wrong. And, you know, the usual kind of hooks. And it wasn't just that they were giving their own opinion, it's that they were trying to sound scientifically correct. But they weren't at all, like, whatsoever, which is even worse than just giving an opinion, in my opinion, you know, because then it makes it sound like real hard fact. And instead of correcting themselves, they just blocked everyone. You know, so they're the type of people that I would, like, call out personally and be like, this is what's going on. This is what you should be looking out for when it comes to experts in the field. But then I get what you mean by then I think it would look a bit... Because you're professionals as well. I feel like you have, like, a certain air to keep up that you need to keep up for your own profession because you're not just social media influencers, right? You have a whole other life outside of that. So I don't think we should be expecting derms to call out other derms or whatever. I think leave that for...
He's like, leave it for me.
Yeah, leave it for me to do. I'll do it. Send me a DM and I'll do it. That does happen, you know. I'm always like, I'll reply to people's stories. I'm like, do you want me to do it? Like, I'll do it. Because it's content for me as well, you know. As much as I play up on the like, you know, this expert and blah, 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 it is educational. And I do feel like as an influencer with so many amazing connections in the industry, I feel like as a skincare community, we're really lucky in the sense that we do all talk behind the scenes, whether you're dermatologist, skinfluencer, cosmetic chemist, we all still have a relatively open communication. And I feel like I've learned so much stuff from so many amazing people. I have a responsibility to share those people. So yeah, I think I'm able to call out people because I lead in the right direction. So I kind of like am away from it. But if you were to do it yourself, I guess it comes across as a bit more like, oh, there's drama, you know, like, oh,
yeah.
I think, you know, it's hard to get the educational point back in there.
I think in a lot of ways, it's because you represent yourself, right? Like, let's say, for example, you decided to just go completely rogue and just start spouting this. Like, let's say that one day you wake up and you decide that like clean beauty, you hate seed oils. Like let's say, for example, you adopt this style of content one day, right? People would attack you, but they would attack you like as an individual. Now, when you're a dermatologist on social media, like I always say, like it's like the gift and the curse of the white coat, right? Because when you wear the white coat, like you immediately get authority, right? And people are like, oh, this person's a dermatologist, right? And a lot of people, and it helps actually get views and it helps you get brand deals and it helps with that like expert angle, right? And a lot of derms will take the advantages of the white coat, right? The credibility that comes with it, the ability to get views that come with it, but they won't take the limitations that come with that white coat, which means that like you shouldn't just be saying things that you recommend or you tried and liked, but it should be based on some type of science. Like you shouldn't just be making like broad recommendations that like don't have the nuance in there, because there is limitations that come with that white coat. So you can't have like both. You can't be this like, I'm going to be like a general beauty influencer, but I'm also going to take the advantage of the authority bias that I have at the same time. Like, you need to decide like which you're going to be, because the thing is that when you take that white coat and you put it on, or you put on scrubs, or you, even if you're not doing either of those things and you're just putting I'm Dr. X in the profile and I'm a board certified dermatologist, like you're borrowing the credibility of every, like the 10,000 other dermatologists, 20,000 other dermatologists in the United States. And the 12 years of education that went into that, you're borrowing that credibility to make the content that you're making, and people believe that. And so when we say things that are inaccurate, it reflects on the entire specialty, right? Because we have like, we're part of like a group, right? So if like there's a takedown of a dermatologist, which has happened often by other experts and by people like yourself on social media, like it reflects badly on every dermatologist, because it's like, oh, like the dermatologists in general are not making accurate recommendations. So we actually have more of a responsibility, I think, than other people do. But part of the reason why is like, I don't think I'm perfect. So and that's just like my like feeling of like, I've probably made mistakes. Like, even though I try my best to be accurate and we try our best to put the research in there and we try our best to add the nuance that we can, we've put out thousands of hours of content at this point. And so I feel like I've probably made a mistake somewhere. And like, you know, like, does that mean that if I made one mistake that like every other thing I put out there should be like questioned, right? And that's the other problem of this is like, you know, one small mistake, does it actually mean that nothing you said is credible anymore? And I do think consumers look at it that way, right? Like if you get called out once for something, it's like suddenly nothing you said should be taken seriously.
Yeah.
There's a lot more grace in this community though than you'd think. I will say, like, because we've said this on our YouTube channel initially, I think especially early on, because we were residents, so there was even more of a cost to us as we entered, and we had so much more pressure to be accurate because we were early, not the first, but we were early and maybe some of the first residents to really broach this. But we were very guarded, cautious, and we made sure everything we said had at least some backing. We put in hours every single day researching topics. But we said in our videos, you know, we're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And I know I've made mistakes speaking, and we've like not changed our positions very much actually over the last 5 years, incredibly, but we have like walked back on certain things a little more. But I think the skincare community has been very gracious in terms of allowing for like a really annoying brand deal I do, or like a misstep. I can't think of anything quite specifically, but for like it's a scientific fact that I was just wrong on. I know it's happened. It exists somewhere. I promise you that. But I think like the equity you've built with your followers over the years, it kind of goes to show that we do have a gracious community. And I'm very thankful for that as a doctor and a dermatologist, because they kind of make, I think there is some allowance for humanness and human nature across the board here.
Yeah. I agree. Like you said as well, whenever I talk about a particular dermatologist, it's never as a whole, but still in the comments you do get people being like, well, this is why I don't listen to dermatologists. And it's like, no, it's not that you shouldn't listen to dermatologists. It's that you should kind of question what they're saying if you think it doesn't quite sound right, or if it's such a bold statement. But like you said, the difference here is that I'm able to make a mistake and be like, well, why would I know that? Do you know what I mean? I'm able to kind of be like, well, you know, or flat out say, I don't know that. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to pronounce this ingredient. And people expect that from me. So I can make so many mistakes but still call out people as long as I'm linked to the right people. But like you said, if you make one mistake, that could be your reputation. You know, that could be like, if you get called out, you are screwed. Like, that is it. Like, that is my worst nightmare. If that ever happens to me, I'm just going to cry and give up.
Yeah, you know, it is interesting.
That could be it.
It could be it. I mean, I hope that people like see that we try our best to be consistent and accurate, you know, and we don't try to like pretend to know things that we don't know, right? Like we don't try to talk outside of like our scope necessarily. But you know, I don't even know how I would navigate a situation like this, honestly. Like how do you navigate a situation like that without, you know, feeling like you're being super defensive, right? You know, do you even acknowledge it? Do you say like, hey, like I made a mistake, or actually maybe there's more nuance here, right? Than like the one thing that you're saying even, right? Because like I think some of these topics could be debated, right? And then some of it could even be like debated on the relevance of it, right? Like there's like let's say for example, common misconception comes from our textbooks in dermatology is that chemical sunscreens absorb light and that, you know, mineral sunscreens reflect light, right? And, you know, it's been debunked many times on social media. It's still in our textbooks, and that's why you continue to see dermatologists like parrot this information. Now that nuance there, right? Like, does it actually matter, right? Like that's the other question is like, does it affect it? Like if someone said like it absorbs light and therefore you shouldn't use it because of the mechanism, or does that actually is it something like that's dangerous in the mechanism of action? Like, does that nuance actually matter, like to the point where it's actually harmful to the person who consumed that information? So I try to look at it from that angle. But you know, sometimes it's like you're just wrong, but like the fact that you're wrong doesn't actually impact the outcome of like you're still telling people to wear sunscreen. You're not saying like don't use chemical sunscreens. Like I don't know. Like, do you see what I'm saying?
Do you know what's so interesting is I've thought this recently. I'm at a point where I'm like, we as skincare consumers have become so educated to the point where I'm like, do we need to know half of this stuff? Like sometimes I'm like, just get like, we need to start. It's difficult. Like it's not as like black and white as I make it sound, but there's got to come a point where we just trust what the brand is saying now. We just got to believe that this ingredient has potentially shown to do what the brand is saying. That I even catch myself like questioning things. I'm like, why am I questioning like that? Just use the product and enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? And like, if you see results, you see results. If you don't, you don't. And maybe that's coming from a place of privilege because of, you know, lots of people spend however much money on their products and mine's a business cost. But I'm more like, we got to just like, we don't need to know everything. Like you said, the sunscreen example, whilst it may not be true, it's kind of, I sometimes feel like it's an oversimplification that isn't necessarily harmful if, like you say, they're not saying like it's been absorbed, so don't use it, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's tough because I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that I feel like we just don't really need to know. And I feel like because skincare is such a science, as consumers, we feel like we need to and should know all of it rather than just being like, oh, this is nice, I'm going to use it. I see results, I'm going to carry on using it. You know?
Yeah. Like there's like some like chemical nuance that salicylic acid is actually not a BHA. It's like technically not chemically structured as a beta hydroxy acid. And so like it would be inaccurate chemically to call salicylic acid a BHA. But everyone does it, right?
Much.
And
like, I don't care.
Does it,
like,
does it matter, right? Like that's my thing. Is like, does it actually like all right, like, you know, who cares, right? Like, does it actually, you know, it's different if you're saying like, you know, benzene is in your sunscreen and it causes cancer or, you know, all these things, or it causes breast cancer or something like this. Like that is like erring on oversimplification to danger. But I try to look at things in like terms of impact. And I think I view it from the perspective of being a dermatologist. And I've thought a lot about this because I consult with brands behind the scenes. And to your point, I do think every brand sends the same brief to everybody. So for example, I've been working with Neutrogena on like, stop sending the same brief to everybody. Like if you're going to work with a skincare influencer, have them talk about their experience. Like if they're talking to a makeup artist, they should talk about how that moisturizer layers under their makeup or it serves as like a primer. Like that should be the brief for the people who talk about makeup. They shouldn't all be talking about how, you know, hyaluronic acid does this and it's, you know, like it works on a chemical. And then when you're talking to the derms, talk about how this is impacting their patients. Like how do they use it with tretinoin? How does it affect people? Maybe they did a study that showed that it's good in acne prone skin. Like that should be in that brief, right? Like the derm should get a brief talking about how this affects their patients. The chemists should be getting briefs talking about like how these ingredients came together in this special formulation that is better than others because these ingredients are put together in such a way that they absorb better into the skin. And I do think then brands would get better content out of people. Because to your point, like not everybody should even be saying the same thing because everybody's expertise is in something different, right? Like when it comes to texture and feel and performance of products, there's like nobody I trust more than you. But then when it comes to like chemical structures, like, you know, and how these, like, you know, how these ingredients are stabilized, like I trust somebody like a lab muffin, right? So it's like everyone has their expertise in something, and everyone's expertise in that thing is valuable, but it doesn't mean that everyone should be talking about things that are outside of their realm of expertise.
Well, so that's where it's interesting, because you have, let's just say, your cosmetic chemists, and then you have your influencers, and then you have your dermatologists. And this is why it's so important for people to follow everybody. Like, you need input from different people. Like a dermatologist's perspective, let me just share with everybody. Our perspective is based off of our clinical perspective. Like, we have a ton of academics in like the human body, from the cell, how it interacts with chemicals, how that engages on a multi-system level. Great. Like, how does that affect your skin? Well, it does kind of get nuanced down. But one thing that a doctor or dermatologist provides is like, when you tell me salicylic acid works for acne, I'm comparing that to Accutane. I'm comparing that to 3,000 patients I've seen get cured from their acne. And that's how I approach that ingredient in terms of like, how well is it going to do for you? Effectiveness, irritation, like how are you going to incorporate that into your daily life? That's actually pretty valuable. But then you have, you know, the cosmetic chemists, and they're like, well, if you take that salicylic acid and you put it with like, I don't know, deer urine, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then you put that on your face, like, this is what actually is going to happen. This is why you shouldn't do that. And then you have someone else who's like, well, I've used salicylic acid and I've used 500 other products, and this works for me, and here's why. Because similarly, to our detriment as a field, our prescription ingredients are often not aesthetically good. They can be very expensive and unaccessible. And so with that combination, like, it is very valuable to have someone like you weighing in and saying like, here's what I use, here's how it works, here's why it works, and like laying it out for people, because they're going to incorporate things into their daily life probably better with you walking them through it than a doctor, especially a doctor who's in the office and off of social media. Like, I've learned so much from social, especially, and from, I think, people that we wouldn't have meaningful conversations with otherwise, because they just don't find their way into the doctor's office often. But all that to say, like, definitely be following multiple people. Everyone has their own level of expertise, which is incredibly valuable. And you can derive different bits. I think most of the confusion is, though, kind of what Dr. Shaw keeps saying is like, experts in their respective field not going beyond your respective field. And there always is a little bit. Like, I'm looking at formulations.
Yeah.
I can't make a formulation, but that still is like valuable to me. And then other people saying, well, this, you know, this like PRP, I saw a video on PRP. It's like, well, and that's where you take platelet-rich plasma, inject into your skin. It's like, well, what was your experience with it? Have your patients done? You know, and so like there is like value from everybody, and I think we all need to consume that and then incorporate what is actually relevant for us.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. Another issue with short form content for me is that people expect somebody to be like the one-stop shop for everything. And when it comes to something like skincare that is so nuanced in so many different areas, it's important to have those different perspectives. And that's why I know there's some people who are like, Derms shouldn't be doing sponsorships, but I'm like, no, they should, because first of all, they're giving us all this free information. Let's get some money, kind of thing. But also, it's nice to see what, like you were saying, in your experience has worked in clinic, but what can I get from CVS? Like, what can I pop down to the drugstore and get? I think that information is so important. That was lacking before Derms ever came onto the scene on social media. So, like, I tried Neutrogena for the first time in ages because of you. Like, I hadn't touched the stuff for like such a long time. But so it's important to see that kind of thing, and then kind of like, I guess, work your way down, and not to put myself at the bottom of the pyramid, at the bottom of, you know, the list of people you should go to. But I feel like nowadays people should have all this education and knowledge from people who are educated, then go to skincare influencers to be like, okay, so where does this fit in like the real world, as far as like, where can I go get this from? What's the best product that kind of fits these tick boxes, that kind of thing, you know? And then, just it all kind of works together. And I don't think people see it like that. People do just expect like a one and done kind of create, and I don't think they exist.
You know, it's better than a pyramid. This is Dr. Shaw's favorite shape.
A cone.
It's a Venn diagram. A cone, no, a Venn diagram.
I try to put everything into a Venn diagram when I explain things to people.
Is that the circle? That's like overlapping circles?
That's like the overlapping circles. Yeah. I love an overlapping circle. It's just the way that I think. Like I think he was telling you, we used to tutor for a long time. So like I would like when you tutor, like you have to like figure out like how do you break into this person's mind? Like they're just not getting it. So like I can explain it so many different ways, but like sometimes you just have to have like a visual cue, like, okay. And then they're like, okay, I finally get it. And I think that's where like the content creation comes from, especially on YouTube, is like I'm trying to like break through. Like how do I like get this to stick into people's minds? I think it comes from like that teaching background for sure. But I love a Venn diagram. I like anything visual. I like actually to structure. If I could structure something into like, even if it's like not perfect, like because like there are really like no rules. Like, you know, what do you say, Dr. Maxwell? The first rule of skincare is there's no rules in skincare or something.
Oh yeah, like something like that.
Yeah. There really are like very few rules, right? Like I love when people go like, you know, these are the ingredients that you absolutely can't mix. And I'm like, says who? You know, like,
I still get that.
Said the ordinary at one time, you know, like, that kind of went everywhere after that.
Actually, speaking about brands, I just saw this video that you did on Paula's Choice. And it was interesting because we did like a full review of Paula's Choice, like probably maybe like a month or so before you did your sort of like history of Paula's Choice. And like, I feel like we missed some of like you caught some things that I didn't catch when we were going through, which is, you know, the price inflation that's occurred in their products over time. Like, it's just not something that I even, you know, thought to cover when we did our video. But like looking back, like you're completely right. The prices have increased pretty dramatically from being like very affordable to being much less affordable. How much does price affect your recommendations when it comes to skincare? Or do you just go like, I like this and it might be expensive, but that's fine?
It's kind of changed a lot, because at first I was like, I need to keep everything affordable. Like everything has to be affordable. It has to be easy accessible. And then I noticed that people do have money sometimes. So I can recommend, you know, like slightly more expensive things. People, you know, are in the market for nicer feeling, not quite luxury, because I don't do luxury skincare. But it still needs to be realistic, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to recommend a serum that's like 100 quid. Like, I'm not going to do that, mainly because I don't think that also reflects obviously like how good a product is, but I just don't think it's realistic. Like, I know skincare has become more of like almost like a collector's kind of thing to do. Like, it's kind of become like the makeup industry where there's constant launches and everyone needs everything from every launch. But still, people, they just want what works, like, and a good recommendation still. But people are willing to pay a little bit more money nowadays for skincare. So it used to be very much drugstore. I used to think 20 quid was too much, like 20 pounds, sorry, was way too much money. But now it fluctuates really depending on what the product is, if that makes sense. Like cleansers, I tend to not recommend anything too expensive. Serums, I might, you know, like 40 to maybe 50 pounds, maybe even a little bit more expensive. But it does play a big part, because I will get sent stuff by brands. I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that. Like, I'm not going to talk about like a 70 quid moisturizer. Like, there's just no need. So yeah, in the beginning, it really affected what I talked about. But now I'm a little bit more lenient, but I still have my real world like costs of like what I would and wouldn't pay for certain things.
Yeah, that's actually an amazing thing that you do. I think a lot of times, like, you can get in this world where like you're either getting sent a lot of stuff, or you like you said, you can write it off as a business expense, and then you just like sort of lose perspective on like what the average person is consuming. And also, like, you know, I think the first time I realized, it was so early on TikTok, it's a crazy time. Like, I remember I was posting and like I had this video go viral on like my 3 favorite retinol products or something. It was like my first like week of creating content, and like 2 months go by, and like I posted a video, and then someone commented on a bunch of people commented on the video, like, oh, I bought that retinol you recommended, and like, I really liked it. And I'm like, oh no, like people are buying the things. Like, you know, like it didn't like, because I started creating content during COVID. So like, it almost felt like it wasn't real. And then I just had this like sudden, like crushing like weight on me of like, oh my God, like people are going to buy the things I recommend. So like, whether it's sponsored or not, like, or whether it's just an organic recommendation, like people have to love it. Like if they don't love it, like they're going to like hate me, or like they're, you know, so like I started to like feel this weight of the recommendations. And then I started to think about price in that capacity, right? Because like if somebody really is like believing every word that I say, which, you know, I think a lot of people do, like especially the influencers that they really like, you know, then if I say like, hey, this vitamin C that's $180 is like the only thing that's great for your skin, then your people will spend the money because they really do want better skin. It's something that really affects people's lives. But did they really need to buy that $180 serum, or is there like other options out there that are equivalent? So I really started to look at it from that perspective of like, like if it, like, I don't want someone to like spend the money that they save that's like, oh, I'm gonna save for this, and like really they could have got something for less expensive. And so I really do try to be like you, like I'm a little bit like, I'll go into like the $50 range, but like we really try to, unless we'll add like a lot of caveats about a product if it's very expensive, especially on YouTube. But in short form content, I really try to keep things like very affordable for people so that I feel like they can see results without having to break the bank.
But I think talking, like you both mentioned, talking about the expensive ones occasionally is relevant. Like I'd maybe talk about an expensive product once every 6 months. I feel like but because they're looking somewhere, right? So if we're not talking about it, somebody else is, and it's probably a paid sponsorship, right? With the expensive luxury skincare in particular. So like, I think the fact that you do talk about them, even if it's exceptional, is extremely valuable. And again, using the normal day-to-day budget as your kind of reference point for the majority of the content is probably a good place to start.
Like, was that Augustinus Bader, whatever? I love that. I don't even know if it's any good. I personally love it, and I hate the fact that I love it. And whenever I talk about it, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm having to talk about this because it's ridiculously priced. Like it's too much, but I will still talk about it because at the end of the day, it's entertainment, I guess. Like if people come to you for skincare recommendations, it's entertaining to watch. But like you were saying earlier, Dr. Shah, like people come to you for your recommendations and they take your recommendations. And if it doesn't work for them, or they feel like they've been swindled in some way, then that reflects poorly on you. And I feel like a lot of influencers nowadays forget they're a business as well. And it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable business move to kind of like take on every sponsorship or pretend you like a certain product when you haven't even tried it. And I think a lot of influencers forget that. And that kind of reflects on how their longevity as an influencer.
So I think about this and I talk about this all the time, and I don't think that influencers sort of understand, because I do think the equation is messed up. I don't know how you started creating content, but I'm like this is going to sound stupid, but when you're in medical school, you're so locked in on this like thing that you almost don't know what's going on in the world. Like I didn't even know like what music was getting released, what movies were coming out, like any cultural or pop relevant stuff. Like I had no clue for like the 8 years or whatever. Like let's say from the time I took my MCAT until the time I was in residency, like where I sort of like emerged as like as a human being again. During that time period, I was so locked in on being a student and being good at that I didn't really know what was going on in the world. And the reason why I say that is like, I kind of created content coming out of that bubble, and it's going to sound insane, but like, I didn't know people were making money on social media. Like it sounds kind of stupid, but like, I just was so not in the culture when I started creating videos that I didn't even realize that it was like a business. And so when I first started creating content, I created content because I loved educating, and I loved the idea of being able to take a concept that was like maybe complex, simplifying it for people, or taking the creativity to make a short form video that could reach millions of people. And I remember when I first got my like first opportunity for a brand deal, I was like, whoa, like no way, like they're gonna pay me to do this. Like this is crazy, especially because I started as a TikToker, and like TikToker, like nobody was doing brand deals for like the first like 8 months of like the platform being huge and massive at that time. Like YouTube was like very mature, like Instagram was very mature, people were getting brand deals, but like I come from the perspective of for 6 months, I didn't do a single brand deal. A brand never reached out to me. I had over 1 million followers. Like every video was getting over 1 million views, and I had not done a single brand deal. And it wasn't because I was like rejecting brand deals. I just like didn't even know that brand deals were like a thing. So the reason why I say that is that like I entered social media from a perspective of like just trying to put out content that was like helpful or educational or even just fun and entertaining, like whatever that is. And then the money like sort of came afterwards. And so to me, like, the trust and the views is why the brands came. And like, they're only there trying to give you brand deals because you have that. And the second you lose that, they go away too, right? They're a consequence of what you built, right? And it's actually your audience that is what they're after, right? And so I think a lot of people who enter social media knowing that there's money in there nowadays and that you can get a brand deal, or if like, you know, say the right things, like you can get paid, they kind of flip it. They're like, I'm making content for the brands. And so in a way, like, it's the audience that they're coming for. And so like when you start recommending things that you wouldn't recommend, like in a brand deal or things you haven't tried, like you said, you lose the trust of the audience, and then the brand deals are going to go away too, right? So then that's why you don't have the longevity for a lot of people, is because they sell their trust too quickly. And the equation is flipped. It should be the other way. Like you should be catering to your audience, really. Like the content is for them. It's not for the brands. The brands are sort of like the advertiser. I always look at it like, you know, when you're watching a TV show, right? Like the TV show's got to be good because no one's going to stick around for the ads, right? But if the TV show's great, like they stick around for the ads. And like, you know, the ads are like essentially like what is within like a TV show. Like you can't just have ads all the time. Like you can have a set amount of ads, and like they get to fit in the stream of other great content that you're providing to people. And like, I think a lot of people do forget that, and that's why they either don't have the longevity or they lose trust very quickly.
So I'll speak to our residents then upcoming, because we see this in a dermatology space. A ton of new dermatologists, they see the presence of dermatologists online, and they're like, oh, that could be me. And the question I would pose to them is, well, why should that be you? Like, what do you have to say that you feel like you need to get out there? And so I'm bringing this kind of full circle here. Because I actually painted on my wall, and I think this reflection in part was because of you. Not entirely, because it was like the end of the year, and so there's always like, oh, I'm looking at my highlight videos and like reflect on my life over the last year. But I did take what you said to heart, and so like I painted on my wall right after I had them painted professionally, by the way. So like I ruined my wall for this, but like it says on the top, like I have different goals. It says bring value, and then I have some personal goals like debt, some health things, a chest rating, whatever, doesn't matter. But then I defined bring value. Like, what does value mean? So I wrote down a smile, inspiration, information, or education. And so like when I look at my posts this year, I'm kind of cataloging them into categories. Like, did I just have fun making this videos? Like I took a surfboard the other week, took it down a hill with snow on it. That was fun for me. So I brought nothing. There's no value in that, except for maybe it made someone smile. Maybe it was like, oh, that's fun. Like that's good. And that's worth it to me. And so looking at that list for anyone entering the space, I mean, I guess dermatologists or not, but I think specifically to young dermatologists or doctors out there, like what is it that you have inside of you that you want to share? Because it doesn't have to be skincare. You can be a dermatologist and do great. Most of the people talking about skincare are not dermatologists. Most of the doctors on this social media are all over the place in terms of scope. They're just looking at anything, and then they'll talk about their medical expertise. I actually feel like we should do more of that. And I know we've kind of talked about that because we are probably overtrained and talk about less than we could. But like, yeah, say you're an anesthesiologist, but you're passionate about like general health. Well, good. You're in good company. That's what the majority of them talk about. Like, so like find out what you're truly passionate about and then let that kind of guide you. So yeah, that was kind of my little quip because you impacted me on that one.
I love that.
Yeah, it's like, not to sound cheesy, but like it's that saying, if you're not doing something you genuinely care about, then people are going to see that. They're going to see right through your content. They know you're just in it for the money. And it's not because like, oh, you know, do what your heart says. I mean, it kind of is, but it's because people are so used to seeing influencers now and how they work. They can read right through, like see right through you. So if you're not doing something you genuinely care about or have a little bit of knowledge in, whether that's just from a hobby point of view or an education, people know. And then something's not going to sit right with them about you or your content. So you really do have to be doing something that you truly are passionate about in whatever way that is.
Okay, let me pivot this a little bit now because you've got many passions, I think. And one that I've been following along with, interestingly. So you have these boxes that you open up.
Yes.
I would love for you to explain these to me. So because, from my perspective, and please understand, like I'm completely uneducated in this. Call me naive, ignorant. I am. But so you open up these boxes. There's often something like kind of hideous or scary, sometimes cute, sometimes not.
Mostly cute, yeah.
But now I'm hooked. I'm like hooked on these things, and I have no idea where they came from. What is this?
So I've always collected toys, right? As an adult, when I got my first YouTube paycheck, I got this huge statue of a game character, right? There's a game called Overwatch, and there was a character from it who I absolutely love, and I got this huge statue, right? And ever since then, this was maybe like, oh my god, like 8 years ago. And ever since then, I've been collecting like rare toys and collectibles and all that kind of stuff. And one thing I discovered a year ago were blind boxes. Essentially, it's adult gambling in like a way. And you get like, there's like a series launches, and then you get one or a couple of boxes from the series, and you don't know what's inside it. So when you open it, it's like a surprise, and you kind of have to talk about what one you want, what one you don't want, and then you open it. And I have become truly addicted to this within the last year, so much so that in the last 3 months, I decided to try and weave it into my content and start to try and make some money back from it.
It's successful.
So yeah,
I'm following along.
Oh, the engagement rates, because I think a lot of people, like viewers, don't understand how important engagement rate is, more so than views sometimes on a video. So to get like a 90% plus engagement rate on a video is crazy to me compared to my other videos. But because people want to see what's in this box, like what you're going to get, what you're not going to get, people watch right until the end. It becomes addictive. And people who didn't even know what blind boxes were are now like hooked on blind box content because it's just so addictive. It's and cute. And yeah, tickles all sorts of like little kind of like things going on in my brain. But yeah,
it's a good,
I like to have something like away from skincare as well, you know, like something that I can show like another side of me other than what's on my own channel and then my joint channel with my brother. It's nice because I don't get very personal online either. I don't let a lot of people into my personal life. So it's nice to show a hobby, but still it not be like this is my personal life, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's a good extension of you. And it's like because it shows your personality and just who you're as a person, but again, without that like really intimate, like, oh, this is the tea at home, you know, that kind of stuff. Because I'm also similar. Like a wall of separation is not only reasonable, but probably good. So I've loved watching you go through this endeavor. So congrats on how that's been received, I think, by the public.
I was going to say though, your content, your like, I don't go out anywhere. So when I see you surfing or skiing, I feel like I've done some exercise in the morning. So I love that content. Like we were saying earlier, like it's interesting to see a certain side of even like experts, like personal lives or what else they're interested in. It's still nice content to watch, and it's often like a nice break as well from like the hardcore education kind of like do this, don't do that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never leave the house either, so I'm sort of like you, and we're very different in that way. Like, so, you know, he's always on some type of adventure. Actually, he's got like, so Dr. Maxwell has like a million hobbies, like whether it's like painting or like playing the drums or like suddenly like he's saying like there's old videos of him like trying to be like a pop star, like singing songs, and now he plays chess and he like does all these things. Like I don't really actually have any hobbies like really at all. But like if I share things about like my family life or something like that, like I'm like into fashion and like kind of like into the things that like beauty people are into, really, honestly. Like so like a lot of like sort of the typical things. Like I like to travel, so I'll share about travels, or I'll share about like my family life, or we just had a baby, so like, you know, like I'll share like a little bit about that. And I do think people want to see like a little bit about like, oh, what is this person like? What is this human like outside of like the main topic that they talk about. And people I think do enjoy seeing that.
I think it's important too. As some kind of trust as well, a bit of like personality, and it's like, you know, who are they beyond what they're talking about, and why would I be interested in them anyway, kind of thing. It adds like a new perspective, which I think is always helpful when it comes to any topic.
Yeah. There's something, but okay, tell me. I feel like there's this weird quality though about us as humans where like, so I love chess, right? Nobody cares about chess. I've thrown this out there on the YouTube channel, and we have a large following from countries that like are really good at chess.
I watched a live stream with you where you were playing chess, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to watch it. Like it was keeping me engaged. I was like, what's he doing?
Nobody cares though. And it's like, but I still have like this inherent desire to like share it. It's like when there's a time with our YouTube channel where we were finishing residency, like who knows where life was going to go. It's like, do we split the channel? Like who knows? Like it's just life, right? And so if you watch the lives from around that period of time, I would always tell people, I was like, you know, I love doing this channel. It's like my favorite thing in the world because, and I don't know if this is a real phrase or not, but I would say like joy is magnified when it's shared. And so if like you derive joy from something, not only can you share it with someone in the real world, but even on social media, there's this weird like impulse to kind of like just put it out there and like share it because it brings value to you. It brings joy to you. It makes you happy. So you're like, oh, I want to see, like, can I make you happy with this too? It's like a weird thing.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think when you've built up such a strong community as well around what you're talking about online, you're like, oh, maybe there might be other people that are really into what I'm into as well, and I could build it equally as good community. But like you often find, like, I don't care about chess, but I found it engaging when you were playing it. I mean, I think it's because I subscribe to you, so I want to see what you're doing. People don't care about blind boxes. They're like, why is this grown man playing with toys? But the engagement, it keeps them there. My joy brings them joy as well, so they're like newly hooked. So I think it's interesting. I find it like, I've learned so much. Like, I don't love TikTok, but the amount of things that like my eyes have been opened up to on TikTok is really interesting. Like, I've learned so much from it, whether it's like educational stuff or just hobbies, other people's hobbies, or, you know, countries,
politics. Like, I do think that's why I was like kind of sad. Like, I do feel like when TikTok is getting banned, and people have like, every time we talk about TikTok, there's always like, oh, it's the worst thing. Like, you know, there's always like people who hate TikTok, especially on YouTube. So, but I do think, like, if you're a TikTok consumer, like, I've learned so much about just like other things, like about other people's hobbies, other people's jobs, about the world, politics around the world. Like, you know, like I do think that like TikTok, like, really opened my eyes to like what the global world, what the global landscape looks like. And like, I actually do like verify stuff I see on TikTok. Like, I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound quite right. Like, is that real? And then I'll like Google it and then like find, and then I'm like, oh, it is like a real, this is a real thing. This is like a thing that really happened. Like, no way. So I do think TikTok did open my mind to like so many different ways of life, that otherwise I would have never even knew existed. Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people came into beauty because of TikTok. Like, if you think about it, like before, like if you say, let's say for you were on YouTube, right? Like, and you were just only consuming YouTube videos, like you would know that you liked beauty and look for beauty YouTubers. Like, maybe you would look at like a palette review, or you'd look up like skincare product recommendations for oily skin. And then you'd find maybe your video, and then you'd watch it, and then you'd kind of get into it. But you have to know what you were searching for on YouTube before. Whereas like TikTok, I think it brought a lot of new people into beauty because they would scroll their feed and they'd say like, oh, I would never otherwise search for this, but I do want to know like how to make my skin more even toned, or like I do want to know like what the best sunscreens are. And suddenly now they're consuming this new content, this new stream of content that otherwise they would have never been exposed to, and maybe never would have even learned anything about. And now they have like a new hobby. So I did think that TikTok, it is and was great for discovering new hobbies and learning things that you would otherwise not even know to search for.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm terrible. Like, you know, you were saying how you kind of like you see something on TikTok, then you have to go and do the research and make sure it's true. I do that mostly, but most of the time I'm like, oh, I saw somebody saying this online the other day, or I read an article and that article was a 14-year-old girl from Texas. Do you know what I mean? Like, I never, there's certain things I'm terrible at verifying, but I'm like, oh, I believe it because so-and-so said it. But I'm not like that when it comes to like my own interest, which is really weird, actually. Like, I should be verifying things.
You know what's funny? Like, I was like in this Uber driver's car. I think we were like in San Diego at the AAD, and he was telling me things like about the world, and I was saying the same things back to him. I'm like, yeah, did you know this happened? He's like, yeah, did you know this happened? And I was like, yeah, like, and this happened. And I'm like, whoa, we have the same feed on TikTok. Like, we're like, our view of the world was shaped by the feed, essentially. And then I was like, and then I was like, I'm like, are you on TikTok a lot? He's like, yeah, I am. And so I'm like, oh, we're like literally like our view of the world has been shaped by having the same For You page, which is interesting because I do think people have completely different timelines, so they like see completely different things. But if you have a similar timeline as somebody else, like, it's like the only stuff you see, like the Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively drama stuff. Like, if you're on that feed, it's like, you know everything about it, and everybody you know knows all the same things.
Yeah, 100%. I feel the TikTok algorithm is so sensitive. Like, it picks up so easy on what you're genuinely interested in, though, or what you know, you watch one video, you watch it for long enough, and then TikTok's going to feed you that constantly. So I love it, but hate it at the same time.
Yeah, me too. I can't reset it. Like, my Instagram feed is really easy to reset. So like when I want to work, when I want to like, okay, what's going on in skincare? I just go to Instagram, type in skincare, and it's like not as like honestly good of videos, but it is. It's all skincare, and then next time I open the app, it's all skincare. TikTok, I cannot reset this stupid app. It's like the most random hodgepodge of like inspiration, religion, politics, skincare, a lot of surfing, like cooking. And I can't, like, when I want to work on it, when I want to learn like a specific thing, I can't like get it pigeonholed back to that topic. It's impossible. Yeah. It's very resilient.
Yeah, you have to really work on your TikTok algorithm. Like, you have to sit down for a good hour and put in the time to like change the algorithm for you. It's really tough.
It is. It's frustrating.
The Remedy account on TikTok, like if I switch to that account, it's all skincare. So like it's all just beauty creators. Like, so whoever like our social media team is just like, I guess, scrolling that content. So I can get on another algorithm like pretty quickly if I need to, because that like Remedy account is just like fully skincare feed. Where it's like too much. I'm like, this is kind of boring now, you know, like when you just watch free skincare content. Like I like the mix of like, whoa, like this thing happened and there was a coup in this country. We're like, whoa, okay, like what's going on here? You know, like I do need to have like that like high octane feed. Otherwise, like I lose interest pretty quickly, which is why I think everybody's going to get ADHD from these apps. Like,
oh, hands down. I am, 100%. Oh my gosh, I am ruined already. I've only been on these for like 3 years. I can barely read a book. Like, and I love to read.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. That's like when it comes to long form, like it's changed long form content so much because I'm like, my intro's changed. I've scrapped like my old intro because people just want you to get on with it. Even though they're on YouTube, it's like, oh, I better get on with it quickly. Otherwise people are just going to click off, which is me. I do that too, but.
All right. So I think we kind of talked about a bunch of random stuff today, but I mean, hopefully people found this. What is it? Valuable, valuable and interesting, or glean some value from it. I like this new concept that Dr. Maxfield has of like forming content. Like, what value does it provide? Even if it's entertainment, like, or a smile, like that's value, I suppose. But thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Genuinely, like, you're one of the best human beings, and like we've always loved and enjoyed your content. And like anytime like you shout us out, or like, you know, you mention us in a video, like someone sends it to us, or like someone like that is on our team will send it, and it like means so much. And even just me personally, like when I launched Remedy and like you gave us like a shout out, like it meant a lot to my team. Like we have Slack, so like they post the video, like, oh my God, like he's talking about us, and like it's super cool. Like it really means a lot. I think as a brand, like I don't think I realized, like as a content creator, like what it means, and like people that you look up to or that your team really likes talks about your company or your brand, because like it's like overall like a good thing for like the morale. Of course it helps boost the business. That's always helpful. But it means a lot, like when you're supportive, and I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. No, it means a lot, honestly. It's nice to have people in the industry as well, like experts that I can like rely on, and send people your way and kind of be like, oh, if you want to follow dermatologists who you can actually trust, follow these two. And I've learned so much from you both as well. Even like when it comes to my rosacea, I've learned a lot. So you've definitely changed my skin as well.
We have a new rosacea video coming out, so
I think
you're like, we reshot our original video and like added more nuances and like updates and products. Amazing. And actually, I think we actually shout you out in that video because of some of the recommendations you've made about like different products that we wanted to share with our audience. Any exciting projects that we can be on the lookout from you? Like, are you working on anything cool that we can be excited? Are you going to drop your own mystery box?
No definites just yet. Just pictures of me inside. Nothing just yet. But I think this year for me is going to be a lot more about what can I do off of YouTube that my followers can still benefit from in some way. Not a brand. I can't deal with that. I've seen how hard it is to create a brand, but you know, more things offline that the community can still be involved with. So.
Okay. Yeah, offline meaning,
I guess,
okay, that's fair. Okay. You mean not like completely offline, not moving to Instagram or TikTok, but like offline things.
Offline. Yeah.
Offline. Okay. All right. Well, cool. We'll be on the lookout for that. Let us know if we can be supportive in any way. But we super appreciate you.
Yeah. I respect you tremendously.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.
Thank you so much. Means a lot, honestly. Thank you so much.